Nate, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend our first time buyer seminar, Next Generation Homeownership, a Toronto Guide for First Time Buyers. It's a webinar that I do every single month, and frankly, I'm quite passionate and excited to do every single month because I talk to new people all the time. I'm just making sure, yep, audio is working. We're good. So I appreciate everyone taking time out of their evening just to come chat about being a first time buyer in the city of Toronto. Again, a little bit of Bruno Mars in tribute to him playing, frankly, across the street from me. So hopefully that you guys weren't waiting too long. I appreciate there's so many people here on time and early. So again, thank you for taking time. A couple of housekeeping items I do want to mention before we do get started. If you'll notice on the screen, you only see my lovely face over here. That's meant for your comfort so you guys can sit back at home. There's no mics, there's no cameras, no nothing. You're just going to hear me talk and explain as many examples as possible. With that being said, it is interactive for you guys. You'll notice at the very bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A section. In that Q&A section, you can ask whatever questions you'd like. I see them on my second screen over here. So as they come up and I see them, I will answer them to the best of my ability. But the good thing with something like this is we do have time at the very end of the Q&A to go over whatever question you like. I say it's free. It's free time, and you can ask me as particular questions you'd like, as detailed as a question you'd like. I'm here for as long as you guys want me to. So all I ask for the first 40 minutes, I tend to go over the content as quickly as I can, but as thoroughly as I can. If I miss something and want me to repeat it, please let me know. But if you want me to go through a very particular situation, let's leave it to the end of the webinar where I will take as much time as you'd like. Again, my name is Gabriele Battista. I am the realtor and owner of Homes into Reality. And let's get started. I think everyone can hear me. Lovely. We're going to cover a lot today, and it tends to be in a few different sections. We do go through the buying process from start to finish, what you can expect once you're ready to start looking for your first home. We're going to talk more about a budget as well. A lot of people in this webinar are going to be early on where they're getting ready to save a down payment, or they're determining how much money they really need to purchase their first home. We're going to go through a very particular budget that I think is going to get you guys ready for success in this market. We're going to talk about the first-time home buyer incentives that you guys as first-time buyers receive in Toronto. We're going to go through the market in some depth. We're going to talk particularly about the Toronto real estate market and how different markets have been affected over the last several years. And then we're going to talk about building your team for success and what next steps look like if you do want to buy your first home, and whether that's in 2 years, 1 year, 3 months, 3 weeks. We're going to talk about all those different timelines for you. And of course, at the very end, we're going to have a Q&A block. For the people just joining us, I saw there's a bunch of people just joined in the last 2 minutes. At the very bottom of our screen, there's a Q&A block. Ask whatever question you like. If it is relevant to the content, I will answer it on the spot. If it's something that shall wait to the very end, we will answer it through the live Q&A block. Let's get to it. Who am I? My way too long 1 minute story. My name is Gabriele Battista. I am the owner and real estate agent behind Homes into Reality. It's a brand we started 8 years ago with the sole purpose of helping first-time buyers achieve home ownership in the city of Toronto. And the harsh reality is Toronto is a quite expensive city to live in, whether it is someone who is coming here for the first time, been here for a long time. There's education that is lacking in the real estate market. So that's where my goals come in, where I've done a first-time buyer webinar very similar to this every single month. We've done some in-person seminars and everything in between. And the real goal behind what we do is to help educate first-time buyers. Madeline, I see that there's a hand up. If you have a question, if you don't mind, put it in the Q&A chat, and I'll answer it as we go on if it's relevant to the content. Thank you very much. We're going to start the whole buying process. The home buying process, I break into 8 simple steps. This is the way that I typically looked at it. Introduction to your real estate agent, getting pre-approved, starting to see properties, putting in offers on homes, deposit on the winning offer, waiving conditions, closing paperwork, and of course, at this point, welcome home. These are the steps we're going to experience when we're ready to take that first big step into home ownership. Now, what that typically looks like is the first step, which is probably the step that can be spread out the furthest. It's an introduction to your real estate agent. And why I say that is today is probably that first step for a lot of people. Lots of people on this webinar may not be ready to buy a home today, but they're getting ready to start that process. And when I say introduction to a real estate agent, as one myself, I think there's a lot of importance of interviewing real estate agents, making sure there's someone that best fits your criteria and your goals. You want to discuss criteria, of course, and timeline. You want to do some research, education, which is exactly what this is research and education. And you, of course, want to do a budget breakdown, which we're going to do in this webinar. This can be done a year ahead of time, or it could be today. The next step tends to be a little bit closer to when we're ready to start seeing properties, but it can be still in between. And it is the first step in the mortgage process. And that's when you actually lock in a rate and you hold that interest rate for 90 to 120 days. The idea with a pre-approval is you want to get confidence if we're actually shopping for properties. We don't want to shop for properties that are not within our budget. A great example, we can be looking at $1 million homes, but if we're not yet pre-approved and then we realize, oh, we only can afford 800,000, that's going to mess up the whole process, and we want to make sure we do go in a particular order. Of course, it provides clarity in your search, and this can be done through a bank or through a mortgage broker. Step number 3 is starting to see properties. This is where we're hitting the road. We're actually, getting in the car, not knocking on doors, but opening doors and seeing different properties in person. And I always like to start with a first-time buyer. Is you want to see different property types in different locations with different criteria. A great example is if we're working with a first-time buyer with an $800,000 budget, we may look at some townhouses, but we also may look at some condos, or maybe we look at some semis and detached homes at $1 million, and different locations give you different things. And the idea is, as you see a large quantity of properties, you will only with time narrow down with constant feedback and turn that into quality. What I typically find I do with first-time buyers is we'll see that large quantity, maybe we'll see 8 homes to start, and they may be in different pockets. We did that this weekend with our brand new first-time buyer, where we saw 3 different neighborhoods and different property types. And now after that, we have lots of feedback, and we're going to approach next weekend to see maybe 2 different neighborhoods at a particular type of property because we know what we like because we've seen it in person. Next step would be putting in offers on homes. At that point, when we see the quality that we want to consider, we then review pricing comparables. Okay, Gabe, I like this property over here. What do we do next? We want to make sure we're not overpaying for a property and we're paying fair market value. And the only way we can do that is look at what's sold in the market, what's similar to that. We want to determine the terms and the conditions of that property. When are we going to close? What price are we looking at? Are we going to put an offer of condition of finance, condition of inspection, and everything in between? Once an offer is submitted, at that point, we can then await for seller feedback and hopefully go back and forth and finalize the deal. It sounds very simple. There is more steps to it, but that is the best way to summarize that step. Once we do have a mutually agreeable decision at a certain price, terms, and all that stuff, at that point, we must bring our deposit in. And that is usually through a bank draft. So a key point to consider is you want to have your deposit money ready to go liquid in a bank account, not in the GIC, not in stocks, not in investments, in a checking account ready to go. And that is typically 5 to 10% of the purchase price within 1 business day of acceptance. And you are legally required to bring the deposit in because any agreement of purchase and sale is signed under seal. So you do have the obligation to commit to a property once you've put in an offer and it's been accepted. Now, let's say we put a conditional offer in there. We then have the opportunity to waive our conditions through due diligence periods. And the typical conditions you've probably heard of, and they actively are the most common conditions, is your lawyer review. If it's a condo, you might look at a finance condition or a home inspection condition. All 3 have extremely important, all 3 are very important conditions that should be considered for different scenarios. And of course, when we're talking about preparing an offer, we discuss which ones are the most important for your particular scenario. We do have usually between 5 to 10 days to, or frankly, 5 and less days to fulfill those conditions. And then at that point, our goal is to fulfill them, waive them, and move forward with a firm deal. At this point, if we decide to withdraw our offer because of these conditions, we then get our deposit back in full. Lastly, we have our closing paperwork. Once everything is firmly committed to, and that typically is after conditions, we have final paperwork is then sent to your lawyer and your mortgage broker, and the money is getting prepared to be sent over to your trust account. And that is typically with the lawyer. This is usually a mountain of paperwork that both sides will want you to do. But there also are some fun things about the closing paperwork where we get to see the property again, bring contractors through, bring the loved ones in to come see it. And of course, we will prepare you on all sides of the transaction to be ready to get those keys shortly. And then lastly is the most fun is welcome home. We will see the property the day before to confirm everything is working and nothing has been stolen from the property or there's no damage to the property. And keys are typically released anywhere between 12 to 5 p.m. of that day. Fun fact, I always try to close on a Thursday. Why is that? Let's say, for example, there is Canada Day is coming up. Let's say that Canada Day is on the 1st and the 31st we're closing. We don't want to close before our weekend. We will want to have a gap between our closing date. We want a business day afterwards in case something were to go wrong, and we don't have to wait either a weekend or a holiday. And Thursdays tend to be my sweet spot. Not a rule, but something that I do pretty often. Again, this is a process that I've gone through with dozens and dozens and dozens. We have 120 plus 5-star reviews that talk about what the home search looks like with Homes into Reality and myself. So whether you're a buyer or seller, landlord, tenant, frankly, in this situation, if you're a first-time buyer, we'd love to take you through the home journey process, and hopefully we can all get there with success and with confidence. So, and of course, if you want to see some of our reviews, you can go to our QR code, or I think this actually goes to my book of calls. So again, if you want my thing, take a screenshot, save it for later, and we can chat more. Now, this is where I think there's a lot of practical things in this next part of the webinar. And I think everyone on here is at different stages, but they will benefit from something like this. And that is creating a proper budget. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's get in more in detail. We'll use this young, handsome man over here as an example. This is Gabe. Gabe wants to buy his first home, and we will use him to create a budget. He has no idea where to start. Probably a lot of people on this call have no idea where to start when it comes to buying their first home today. Gabe wants to buy a condo for $620,000, and he needs to determine how much total savings amount he needs to purchase this condo. He's also very smart, handsome, and runs a very successful webinar. I've used that joke twice so far. It'll be the last time. But we're going to use this very particular example. You guys may be looking at a condo, you may not, but this can be worked for any different price point. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, this is the stuff that you may think is an expense, but it's not. Getting a pre-approval. If you go to the majority of mortgage brokers and banks will not cost you a dime to hold you to that lender. A pre-approval works as a rate hold and a great guide on the shop properties of confidence. The cost to use these is $0. I have one question in the Q&A right now asking, does a pre-approval hurt your credit? It's a great question. The mortgage partners that I use, there are different types of pre-approvals, quote unquote. Well, eventually, when you do want to get a firm pre-approval, they will pull your credit. Now, that does not necessarily hurt your credit, but it definitely means that they have to pull your credit to confirm. What you can do is you can still get a guideline from any mortgage broker until you are really ready to start purchasing. But I would tell you, if you're ready to start the process and look at homes, getting a firm pre-approval is extremely valuable. Real estate agent commissions. For any property that is listed on the MLS, which is the multiple listing services that, or like realtor.ca is an MLS, for example, and is working with a real estate agent such as myself, you can have confidence that you will not incur any costs from my services. This is the way I run my business. Every real estate agent is different. But in terms of realtor commissions, I am paid through the proceeds of the sale. And that is something to consider, that there be no cost out of pocket coming out from your wallets. This is the budget framework that I tend to work with. We break our savings goal into down payment, closing costs, and emergency fund. We'll start with down payment. The down payment in Canada works as a sliding scale. Anything under $500,000, you will be looking at a 5% down payment. So the example is a $495,000 one-bedroom condo at 5% is just under $25K at $24,750 a month. That's very simple math. Anything under that 500K scale, just do 5%. That's your minimum down payment. The moment you get between $5 and $1.5 million, which is the majority of first-time buyers. There are tons of first-time buyers under 500,000, but the majority of them are in this price point, especially in Toronto. You're looking at 5% of the first 500K, similar to the first diagram, but the remainder of that purchase price will be at 10%. The example we use here for a two-bedroom condo selling for $830,000, you're looking at 5% of the first 500,000, and the remainder $330,000 is at 10%. So $25,000 plus $33,000 gets you $58,000 as a minimum down payment. I see a question in the chat. Do we have to pay 20% down to avoid insurance? What would be better? It's a great question, and that leads us to our last part. 20% is once you get to $1.5 million. The moment you get to $1.5 million, it is now a 20% down payment. And as the question mentions, default insurance is no longer required. Now, what is default insurance? In short, all it really is you're protecting the lender because you haven't put enough money down. So some people look at it as a benefit to put 20% down to avoid that cost up front. Now, I don't think it's a hard rule about you have to do this or that, because the question becomes, what would be better? And my example to you is, actually, before I say that, also notice the moment you get to $1.5 million, which again is a pretty large amount. Most people are not going to be above $1.5 million. Notice that the down payment goes up dramatically from $1.49999 to $1.5 million. So a lot of people will want to stay under that price point. The limits used to be at $1 million, where it got a bit more complicated, but you can tell that this change is actually helping first-time buyers get into at a slightly higher price point. To answer the question, I said I would get back to it. What is the best? And for this example, we mentioned $620,000. I would tell you it's so situational. And I like to do this example where we put in a purchase price. I use ratehub.ca's tool because I think it's very user-friendly and it's very visual. The minimum down payment on $620,000 condo is $37,000. At 10%, 15, and 20, those are the down payments. Excuse me. The down payments accordingly. You're also going to notice that the CMHC insurance goes down as you increase your down payment. So what I would ask people is, if you have the money available to you, I think there's an argument to be made to put that money down. That doesn't mean you have to or you should, but it definitely helps you because this insurance amount is added onto your mortgage. You don't pay this $23,000 up front, but if you notice in this graph, it is added onto the total mortgage amount, which then makes your payment go up a little bit higher, and then it takes you maybe not longer to pay off your mortgage, but more interest you're paying over time. So I would recommend, if it's something that you have the money for, there's an argument to be made, but I also make the argument to compare the down payments for what your mortgage payment cost is. Some people may not want to put 20% down because they are really interested in the stock market and they don't want to take the money out of stock markets because they're making money on it. And they are okay paying a bit more of an insurance premium in this consideration that they can use that money to, let's say, maybe hopefully get appreciation somewhere else, or they don't want to use certain dollar amounts. And of course, as you increase your down payment, your mortgage payment goes down. So at minimum down payment for a $620,000 condo, you're paying $3,137. At 20% down, you're paying $2,660. So that is a difference of about $500. Is that 500? Yeah, just about $500. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So again, down payment 5 to 20% of your purchase price, and then you then determine your down payment with your monthly mortgage payment. Next, your closing costs. Now, this is the largest closing cost of them all, which is your land transfer tax. How it is calculated is this lovely math equation over here. For the sake of conversation, I will not read this entire thing, but this is how the land transfer tax is calculated. And this is a one-time cost that is paid to the government through your lawyer upon closing. And the way that it is calculated is this, obviously, this equation, but it depends on where you're purchasing the property. If you're purchasing the property in Toronto, you're special. You get to pay 2 land transfer taxes instead of 1. So in our example of a $620,000 condo, you're using this equation twice. You're paying once for the Toronto tax, once for the Ontario tax. I know, very lovely. They love to tax us as much as they can. The good news is you do get a rebate up to $8,475, depending on the purchase price and when you or where you purchase the property. To get more particular about this, if you want to get the rebate, if you are in Toronto and you're purchasing a $620,000 condo, you're paying $8,875 to Toronto, $8,875 to Ontario, but you get a rebate up front of $8,475, which minimizes your total owing to $9,275. Now, you do not pay the $17,750 up front and get the money back. You just never pay that $8,475. So this would be your total owing upon closing as your land transfer tax. Pivot to, let's say, a townhouse in Ottawa. This can also be something in Mississauga, in Durham, in Barrie, as long as it's outside of Toronto proper. You will only pay one land transfer tax, but you will only get a rebate up to $4,000. So it's a bit of a sliding scale. You do pay less land transfer tax, but you get a smaller rebate, which is only fair. And in this example over here, you would pay, because it is a higher purchase price too, $14,275. Get rid of $4,000, it's only $10,275. Question in the chat, is this land transfer tax exclusive for first-time buyers only? Great question. It is not. This is a tax you have to pay every time you transact in Toronto or Toronto and in Ontario. The key thing with this is probably the biggest benefit, and we're going to get to incentives shortly, but this is the biggest benefit for first-time buyers because it is a meaningful amount of money you're going to save. A lot of time people are buying property and they're moving up to the next property type. They're paying a pretty hefty penny because they don't get the full rebate back. So you do have to pay land transfer tax for all purchases, not just first-time buyers. Correct. The rebate is only for first-time home buyers. A distinction I want to make, this rebate is available to you if you are moving into the property for yourself. If you want to be an investor, which I would hope most people on this call probably are not going to be investors, and I'll tell you why maybe later. But if you purchase this property for yourself, you have to live in the property to get this rebate. And then both, let's say you're a spouse, two people buying together and your spouses, you both have to be first-time buyers to get this rebate as well. One more thing I'll mention that comes up a lot is, let's say you're purchasing property with your family. Let's say your parents are co-signing with you to get there. There are ways for you to maximize the amount of rebate that you get, even though, let's say, a parent is not a first-time buyer, but it has to be structured with your lawyer a bit differently. Depends on how much you own versus what your parents or co-signer owns. Partner expenses, other closing costs to consider are lawyer fees plus disbursements. Disbursements essentially are anything that the lawyer pays for to close this deal, you're going to pay for it to compensate them for it. The lawyers will charge you a flat fee, plus they're going to charge you disbursements. A typical good budget of this is $1,500 plus a few $100s for disbursements. The example I use, that's a little bit dumb, but it will explain it for you, is if they photocopy something for you and they get charged 10 cents, you will pay that 10 cents. The more realistic thing is it costs money to search title of a property. That might cost, $50, $100, $150. That cost gets pushed back onto you. Title insurance, that is a mandatory cost to consider, and frankly is a really important cost to consider in the rare case that there's title fraud. The best example I can give you is a few years back, there was a news story on CTV about this lovely family that went to Florida on vacation, and when they came back, they found out that someone sold their house and they frauded the paperwork to get it sold. Their title insurance protected them. Again, very rare, but very important to have because otherwise they're out of a house and they're in some trouble. So now we have our down payment, we have our closing costs. Most people would say that's enough, we're good to go. I take it one step further, and I get critiqued sometimes for this, but I do think it's important, is talking about your emergency fund. And, I'll use our dummy Gabe over here as our example. He's a real estate agent, he's self-employed. My dollar this month versus last month and next month is always going to be different. There's probably lots of people on this webinar who don't work salary jobs. They might be self-employed, they might be commission-based. Even if you are working a salary job, your expenses may fluctuate month to month. And I always tell people, have cash set aside so you can feel comfortable once you buy this property, you're not, I think the saying is house rich, but you're actually poor because you can't afford the furniture and everything inside it. I always screw up that saying, but the idea is you want to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses ahead of time for the purchase, just to cover major expenses that come up. And I always say put in a high interest savings account where there's no risk, no high risk investments, because you want to protect yourself from future expenses coming up, and of course to pay what your mortgage will be. I typically will calculate this by getting your future mortgage payments, plus let's say if you have any condo fees, groceries, utilities, car expenses, insurance. Put that all up in one number, times it by 3, times it by 6, somewhere in between, depending on your comfort level, is what I would typically have as an emergency fund. Moving expenses and furniture. If you have no furniture, you gotta buy it. So have money set aside for that as well. So we have our big eyes over here. What is this cost of this budget? For a $620,000 condo, we ended up doing $18,000 for emergency fund, $124,000 if you put 20% down, and then $9,275 for land transfer tax, lawyer fees, and a little bit of a buffer gets us to a total of $154,000. And you're going to say, I'm getting off this webinar. That's a ton of money for an entry-level condo. And I agree. This is on the higher end of most budgets. And I would also tell you, if we switch that down payment to what a minimum down payment is, and then we account for a higher mortgage payment, we then drop that budget into half at $72,000. Now keep in mind, with a lower down payment, you're going to have higher mortgage payments. So you might want to have a higher emergency fund. You might want to have, your minimum down payment, of course, goes down, but you have a higher monthly payment. You will pay a bit more in closing costs because you have to pay for the HST on the mortgage insurance, which in this case is $3,031. So your closing costs go up, your emergency fund goes up, your down payment goes down. What did I do here? Oh, I think it's added onto it. Okay. So that's why every budget is very particular for the person. And the good thing is you can create this budget for free and extremely easily. At our website at homesintoreality.ca, you can type in that on the website. Actually, I have it over here, don't I? Yep. We have a tools section to our website where you can do all of these things yourself. So if you want to determine what your land transfer tax is, you have that here. If you want to see what your affordability is more or less with mortgage ratios, you can do that there. Does not replace a pre-approval, but it gives you some sort of idea. Closing costs, what you want to estimate, you can do that there as well. Rent versus buy, first home savings accounts, which we'll talk about. And then, of course, this calculator we just did, you can do one for free. And, okay, for example, this is all this stuff over here. Actually, it's a $620,000 mortgage plus an emergency fund, which you can kind of mess around with. You can then download a PDF, which might come up right here. And it gives you an idea of what we're looking at for a savings goal. So I encourage everyone over here, mess around with something like this. And if you want to do a budget together, we can do that as well. All I would ask is we book a call. And again, you can book a call through my website over here, or you can book a call through this link over here. A great example that this is one that happened last year on the webinar I keep going back to. In February 2025, they attended our webinar. They were very attentive, asked a lot of questions, and then they booked a call for the next day. So it was Thursday, then on Friday they booked a call. They wanted to buy a condo townhouse, and they told me they wanted me to help them with an offer. I looked through it, and I realized it was a really poor choice to purchase that particular condo townhouse. So we saved them from buying a really poorly maintained property. We went through this budget exercise together, and we realized they were missing some pretty key costs. We then got them pre-approved with a great mortgage broker. They got a clear budget. They actually could afford more than they thought they could. And we started seeing neighborhoods they much rather preferred. Once we saw the house, we then negotiated $20,000 off the list price with conditions and competing against multiple offers. and they secured a family home that they'll be happy with forever. They purchased the property in April and closed in June. So they attended this webinar in less than 6 months. They were then homeowners. So this can be you guys. And of course, if you want to do this, at the very bottom of the screen, you can then book a call with me and we can discuss how we can best help you out. Okay, the fun stuff. First time buyer incentives. How can we take advantage of being a first time buyer in the city of Toronto? We'll list off some quick ones. First-time buyers may qualify for a tax credit up to $1,500. This one's simple. You tell your accountant, hey, I bought my first home. Can I get this tax credit? They put it on your taxes and you can save up to $1,500. Lovely. Depends on your income bracket as well, but that will just save you money off the top. And frankly, $1,500 sounds like nothing, but that's the cost of movers. That's the cost of, furniture. It's every dollar counts as a first-time buyer. The land transfer tax credit we talked about, you get a rebate of $8,475 off. And then your RRSP Home Buyer Plan, we're going to talk about this in more detail in a budgeting section. I'm also going to skip something really quickly because there's been some changes. The other thing that you get as first-time buyers is you have access to 30-year amortization mortgages. So instead of getting 25-year amortization, you get now access to 30-year amortization. What does that mean? The amortization basically means how spread far along can your mortgage be. So let's say you're paying $750,000 down. Those payments are now spread out between, instead of 25 years, 30 years. And at that point, you will lower your monthly payment by almost, in this case, $300 a month. Now, I will put a caveat to this. By taking advantage of a 30-year amortization mortgage, you will pay dramatically more interest on the property and the lifetime of that loan. I still recommend you do a 30-year amortization. And I was convinced of this years ago with my great mortgage colleague that I work with, and some of you guys may end up working with, because he explained the key thing about financial planning. And it's always best to have the option to pay the lowest mortgage amount on a monthly basis as possible. But most great mortgage brokers are going to make sure that you have an ability to prepay your mortgage once a year. So let's say you're in a situation where you can only pay the minimum payment, that's fine. It allows you to save more money, be a little bit more diligent with your monthly expenses. And when the time comes and you have cash ready to go, there's no reason why you can't put that money towards your mortgage and to pay down not even the interest of the property, the principal, which again is more effective than a typical mortgage payment. So it's always good to start with 30 years and pay it off as fast as you feel comfortable with. The other thing as well is the new HST rebate, which has been announced by the federal and the provincial government. There are some stipulations to this. We're going to talk about this on a pretty high level. I imagine we'll get a couple questions in the chat about this because it's so brand new. This is a rebate for first-time buyers on the federal side, but all buyers have access to it on the provincial side. Long story short, it is for any brand new building or dramatically renovated, substantially renovated home. And this, for the federal side, it has to be a primary place of residence. On the HSC side, it has to be your primary residence or a long-term rental. Now, the idea behind this is the new construction industry in Toronto and frankly in Canada has essentially shut down since the peaks of 2022. Nobody is buying new builds, and for obvious reasons. The properties are too expensive. The cost above resale is way too high. And it doesn't make sense for someone like, let's say one of the first time buyers like you guys over here, to pay 30% more for a new build than a resale property. Long story short, no one was buying new homes. This was an incentive from the federal and provincial government to get people to buy these homes or to buy new construction to stimulate the construction business, number one, and number two, to get new builds, started, get projects going, so there's not a housing shortage in years to come because no one's going to be able to build. You can get up to $130,000. You can get up to $130,000 rebate on any new construction in this case. Now, what I always ask people is not every buyer is going to see this money. Whether you benefit depends on what type of builder has priced it into the unit. And because the builders at the end they control their pricing, just because you're getting 13% off their purchase price does not mean you're getting a great deal. So I always exercise caution with programs like this. The real question is, can you get something that is close to what resale value is and get it closer because you're not paying HST on that property anymore? I just ask people to exercise caution and not assume every single new build is now a great deal, because I'm working with clients where some builders have great opportunity and some builders have no opportunity. So again, that's the high level overview about this. I'm happy to talk people in more particular specific situations when it comes to the HST stuff if you want to book a call. Now, we mentioned the RRSP Home Buyer Plan and the First Home Savings Account. These two are very powerful tools. If you do proper financial planning, you are going to reap definite benefits. Now, the summary is your RRSP Home Buyer Plan, you can withdraw up to $60,000 from your RSPs to go towards the purchase of your first home. You do need to repay that amount back to your RSPs over 15 years in equal payments. And those payments are interest-free as well. And for your first home savings account, you can access up to $40,000. I believe this conversation about increasing that amount too, but you can access up to $40,000 plus the appreciation at the amount in that account. Your example really is, and the way that these things are structured is, if you make $88,000 a year, you put $8,000 into your first home savings account, and your taxable income is now $80,000. You are not paying income tax on that $8,000. So it works very similar to an RSP where there is tax deductions and you'll pay less income tax going forward. And then once the money is in there, you can put $8,000, I guess, for 5 years, up to a total lifetime contribution amount of $40,000. And then when you're ready to purchase that first home, you can take all that money out tax-free, and that's $40,000 plus any appreciation. So if you bought stocks in your first home savings account and they went up, I don't know, let's say they went up 10%, you keep that 10% tax-free compared to a lot of other different, like a non-registered account in terms of investment. Now, where's the real power in these accounts? Because to be frank, if you just open them, you don't really use them, these things are useless. The real power is if you do proper planning. The example we're going to give over here is, if over 3 years you contribute $8,000 to your first home savings account, and in this case, I think it is 11,000, maybe 12, about just under $12,000 to your RSPs, you at that point, you and your spouse can each save just under $60,000 each. So in 3 years, if you're aggressive, if you're on top of your budget, you can save up to $118,000 for your first home down payment. Now, if it was that easy, I wouldn't be here. You guys wouldn't be here. Anyone would just do this. I'm very aware it's difficult to purchase that first home. Now, what's important is we should now use the income tax deductions to your advantage. So let's say you contributed every single year just under $20,000. $8,000 of it is going to your first home savings account, and the other $12,000 is for your RSPs. You will then reap a benefit of $8,534 a month. That's money you're saving off your income taxes. So instead of paying that money back during tax season or getting no money back during tax season, you're giving a large chunk of money back during tax season. Now, that $8,000 can go straight into your next year's first home savings account, or it can go straight to your RSPs, or it can go straight towards, your payments for the year to make sure you can aggressively save. So just by using, again, these are just income levels that may help you, but they can work for any income level. You should use those tax deductions to aggressively put more money towards that down payment. And for this situation here, the husband and wife making these incomes over here, they're saving $59,000 a year on their RSPs plus their first home savings account, but they're also gaining $25,000 over 3 years, $21,000 over 3 years. That money that they were to usually pay in taxes, they're now getting that money back, and that's almost $50,000 that they're gaining from using these programs. So there is some particular planning involved with this, but I encourage you to have those conversations. And of course, that's why we have these budgets over here, your first home savings account and your RSP tools. I built this tool to help people like you guys to really figure out how many years we want to buy a home in, what's our balance, what contributions are we going to make, and all that stuff in between. If there's two of you, they'll double it. Long story short, we should use these programs to our benefit. I'm realizing I'm going a little bit long on time, so I'm going to quickly jump through some of this stuff. But mentioned over here, total, that is $118,000. That is almost enough for a 20% down payment, and it is certainly enough for a minimum down payment. So I encourage you guys to use these tools to your advantage. I'd be happy to discuss about these tools more in detail if you'd like. We talked about this, and now we're talking about the real estate market. This is where I have a lot of fun. Honestly, this is where I get, there's a big nerdy background to the real estate work that I do. I love numbers. I love this type of conversation, and this is where I excel the most. So the real estate market is really broken into, what dictates price. It's supply and demand, which is generic to say, but I'll show you what I mean. When prices were at their highest, we were dealing with a real estate market, I think you can see my thing over here, that had very low amount of listings, the blue and the orange. It had low amount of listings, therefore more buyers, really pushed up the sales, or really there was a lot of sales on the market and very few listings. Prices went up dramatically. Now, in the last 4 years, we've seen prices come down. In some cases, well, in all cases, double digits, but anywhere between 20 and 30% prices have come down depending on the property type. So we saw in the beginning of 2023, inventory skyrocketed in the fall, and that was sustained. Came back down during the winter, but then we saw in 2024, inventory came back up. And when inventory comes back up, it puts pressure on prices downwards. And then we saw the peak amount of listings last year in 2025, where the active listings in the market hit their highest in June of 2025. Now, this is the first year in 2026 where we've seen listings come down year over year. That's not nothing. It doesn't necessarily mean property prices are going to go through the roof, but it does mean that the highest level of supplies is likely behind us. Now, this is the fourth month we've seen this trend, but so far, I believe this is the trend we're going to see for the next few years, is supply slowly going to come back down to a more reasonable level. And the important thing to note is property prices cannot meaningfully come back up until this active inventory level comes back down. And right now, we're seeing it slowly come back down, but it's not to the level that prices are going to dramatically go back up. Property sales currently are also very low, and we've seen low property sales for the past 4 years. Actually, frankly, 4.5 years. So those are important things that I look at when it comes to analyzing the market. Property prices in April, your detached home was 1.311 million. Semis were 1.18 million. Freehold towns are 1.215. Condo towns at 700,000, and condo apartments are at 560,000. All property types are down year over year. At the beginning of the year, I saw all property types are down about 8%. Now, your detached homes are now down 5.6% versus your condo apartments are down almost 10%. What I'm seeing is the first property type likely to rebound are likely going to be your freehold detached homes, your semi-detached homes, versus your condo apartments are slowly inching downwards. You'll notice this year, the red line over here, in the spring months where activity and quality of property is at its highest, prices did go up. And I expect them to be even high for May. We're still down compared to last year, but property prices did go up for the spring. Versus in the busiest time of year, for condos, they've actually come down. So this is where we're seeing gaps in the market where, depending on the property type we're looking at, you may look at different scenarios. And I would encourage you to have those conversations up front. If I'm helping a client, I want to learn what's going on in your situation to make sure you're succeeding in this type of market. If you're curious, the numbers that compare different condo types, studios are a bit volatile, so I don't look at this number too much, but this is the median price point of studios, 1 bedrooms, 1+dens, 2 bedrooms, and these are the rent prices according with it. You notice that every year, condo prices have kind of inched downwards, again, about 8 to 10%. Now, rents have slowly inched downwards as well, but that's after there was a couple of years of really large increases in 2023. Funny enough, at the peak in 2022, a 2 bedroom was a median price point was $850,000. Now we're looking $200,000 lower at $641,000. Food for thought. Now, the way that we look at home prices is I want, when you're looking at the market, if you are going to buy today, I don't necessarily think there's a good or a bad time to buy a property, but I would say everyone on this call right now should be looking for their own selfish needs. If they are looking for their family to buy into a home, if you're having a kid, if you're getting married, if you're doing this, you're doing that, the market should not dictate if you're buying a home. And we're going to talk about that in a second. And this entire graph in the 90s is showing what happened with real estate prices over almost 3 decades and how they've gone up long term consistently. You'll notice that some years prices go down, prices go up, but long term real estate prices have always fared positively in Canada. Now, that leads to what my recommendation is for people. People ask me, should I be renting or should I be buying? And I've had dozens of people from this call. We set up a phone call afterwards and I say, hey, here's your situation. I think it makes sense for you to be renting versus buying. And why do I determine that? If you are looking for a 1 to 2 year timeline, if your job is not stable, if you're still building your down payment or your emergency fund, you want flexibility to move, you want to move neighborhoods, cities, you're not too sure how much you like the city, the monthly ownership cost is too high, or you're uncomfortably tight buying a property, or you're just unsure what type of home or area fits your lifestyle. These are all short-term needs. And in that case, I think the flexibility of renting is dramatically superior to buying. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. It actually, in my case, should be encouraged. If you're looking at something short-term with these situations, it makes a lot of sense for people to be renting versus buying. Now, if you plan to stay put in your property for 3+ years, your income is stable, predictable, and it may even be going up. Your monthly costs as an owner fit your budget comfortably. You have a down payment saved plus closing costs. You want stability and control over your living space, and you're ready to plan long-term in one location. These are all signs that you should be buying in those scenarios. And those are all long-term situations. The key thing is you're in control of your destiny when you're purchasing. And if we go back to what a long-term basis is, I bet you people in 94 didn't know if the real estate market was going to go up, down, or sideways. This over here, this flat market, looks pretty similar to this flat and declining market right now. But there's people in the 90s that wanted to buy a home because their family needed a home and they want to stay there long term. They may have been made fun of to buy a home in 94 because prices went down, but now they're laughing in 2025 because house prices appreciated so much in the long term. And I encourage first-time buyers to have the same perspective. If they're looking at a property long term, look at the long term perspective and not your short term perspective. And lastly, build your team for success. I'm going a little bit over my talking time. If you are ready to make that move and look for a home, you want to look in the circle of trust. And what that means is you're going to usually have 4 people by your side when purchasing a property. And that is a real estate agent, could be me, could be someone else, could be this handsome fellow. Could be you'd also need a mortgage broker, a real estate lawyer, and a home inspector. Now, all of these different vendors, there's tons of them out there. If for real estate agents, there's 70,000 of them out there. For mortgage brokers, there's thousands of them out there. Same with real estate lawyers and probably hundreds of home inspectors. They're not all created equal. Some of them may do it part-time. Some of them are not as educated in the business. Some of them just have their license to hopefully make a quick buck here and there. So when I encourage you buying your very first property, or any property to say the least, I encourage you to look at the circle of trust. You want to find someone who has empathy, is understanding, caring, and is authentic about how they're helping you. Competent, has knowledge, skills, and experience to really help you move along the process. Someone who's transparent, someone who's honest, clarity, and is going to communicate with you openly and, you know, not steer you in the wrong direction for their own selfish best interests. And lastly, dependable. They're going to make promises to you and they're going to keep them. They're going to maintain a confidentiality with your situation and, of course, drive you to be the best, have the best scenario possible. All these are things that I encourage you to do when interviewing real estate agents, mortgage brokers, lawyers, and home inspectors. Make sure these are the right people for you, because the wrong person helping you along this process will separate a good transaction from a really poor transaction. Of course, we have tons of resources. We're going to get to our Q&A in 2 seconds. We have tons of resources at my website at homesintoreality.ca. We've got lots. We've got the buying process broken down best you can. We got the first home blueprint is my signature way of going about these things. We have neighborhood searching tools. We have going through the incentives you have as first-time buyers. We have recordings of webinars as well. And of course, if you want to book a call with me, you can do so through this lovely way as well. I encourage you guys to look on this website to get next steps and really get started on what you guys are looking to do. And of course, what I do is we helped tons of people last year. We were able to help 56 families with their first home needs in 2025, with their real estate needs in 2025. So that is you. I encourage you to reach out. And of course, we do weekly content on our Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok pages. So I encourage you guys to follow there to learn more. And of course, if you're looking to talk more about your home search, please book a time on my calendar very quickly as well. All of these stats over here. We do have a monthly newsletter that goes out that updates these graphs every single month. So if you want these graphs, you guys will get them. You will be on that list to receive those graphs on a monthly basis, keeping you updated on the real estate market. Now, we're going to go through some Q&A. For everyone who joined a little bit later, in the very bottom of the screen, you can ask whatever questions you'd like, whether it's about your scenario, whether it's about what you're looking to do, questions about the actual process, maybe something that I missed, any burning questions you have, and ask them in the Q&A section. And we'll go through that for the next 10 minutes, 5 minutes, depending how long people have. But I also encourage, if you've got to get going, screenshot this. You can book a call that we can talk a little bit further about your first home needs. I'm happy to discuss their situation with anybody else. I'll give people a couple minutes to ask them to get some questions ready, then we'll get started. Do you recommend a condo or a freehold house? It's a great question. What I would encourage you to consider is look at your situation. If we go back to this graph over here, short-term and long-term doesn't only fit your overall goals, but think about your lifestyle. If you have a short-term goal where I can live in a condo for a year, but then I want to move to a house because I'm having triplets. I don't know. That's going to be your short-term needs are going to fit a condo, and your long-term needs are going to fit a freehold property. So I would say buying a condo in this case wouldn't work very well. Let's say you're someone who's 25 and is working downtown, wants to be in a condo, appreciates this type of lifestyle. You may look as a long-term prospect to be buying a condo downtown, or buying a condo for me in North York, wherever it may be. So I would tell you, I really encourage you, there's not right or wrong answer. Really figure out what's going on in your situation. Of course, budget is also a factor of this as well. If you can afford a detached home, that market's been doing better. So, excuse me, I would really have that tough conversation with yourself to see if it makes sense. And if you don't want to have it with yourself, have it with me, because I'm happy to have it with you. For the land transfer tax, is that okay? So someone wants me to discuss the buying with a parent. So if you are buying with family, A great example is if you're buying with your father and they're going to help you with a down payment and they're going to gift you some funds. You can structure your purchase agreement to be you would own 99% of the property and let's say your father would own 1%. The way that's structured allows you to get 99% of the land transfer tax rebate, and your father, who maybe already not maybe a homeowner, will not get the 1% rebate, is the best way I would describe it. Other ways to consider is if you want, parents can gift money to their children for a down payment. Now, not everyone's in that situation, but they can do that, of course. And they don't have to be on title. Now, my recommendation always is if family's going to help you and help you get into a home, I always think it's fair for them to be on title because they're supporting you on your homeownership journey. Great question. The question is, if you have a large RSP, can I use the entire thing for a down payment? I'm a first-time buyer. I don't have a first home savings account. It's a great question. Thank you for the question. It's a bit situational, but there is a cap of $60,000 you can take out of the RSP. If that is what you need to use it for, I would tell you, and especially if an employer is matching those amounts too, it's pretty beneficial. You can use up to $60,000 from your RSPs towards your down payment. I would encourage you, if you don't have a first home savings account and you have liquid cash, it may make sense to put money into a first home savings account to be able to use it. I just think if there's tax benefits to consider it, but of course there is some planning involved that we have to discuss on that end. But yes, you can use the entire thing. It's just up to $60,000. And then keep in mind, you have to make equal payments over 15 years back to your to your RSP. So those payments will be larger because it's a larger down payment. Thank you for the question. Someone asked about getting the stats I have here. You'll notice this is one of my Excel spreadsheets. This is where I track all my pricing data. So if you are interested in getting these, you will get these graphs on a monthly basis as long as you've joined the webinar, so you will get them. And I keep them updated because for me, I always look at pricing on a micro level in terms of what type of properties we're looking at. Are we looking at different locations? We break that down every single month with the data that we're given as a real estate agent. So thank you for that question. Yes, there will be a recording of this. I think we still are recording, I believe. I always got to double check. Yeah, we are recording. I will post these webinars on YouTube where you can then take a look, and I will, we can have this conversation again. And I'm happy to send you a recording as well. I most likely will be reaching out to everyone as well, just give you as a quick call. I would love a little bit of feedback on what you guys like and what you don't like about the webinar. I want to make these as good as possible. We've been doing these for 3 years. We've helped dozens and dozens of people do with their first home goals. So I'm looking forward to getting some feedback from you guys to hopefully make this better all the time. I don't have any more questions that we haven't gone through yet. I will say, again, if you want to book a call on my calendar, it goes directly to my Google Calendar. So if I got availability, you can book it. I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone here about their situation, how I can best help. There's no obligation. We have to see it for the right fit. And I want to make sure that you are at least put into the right direction when it comes to buying their first home. So again, take a screenshot, book time in my calendar, and I hope to hear from everybody. I'm going to put a little bit of music as we hang out to make sure there's no other questions. But I think we're okay.